Hey everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at the Group 1 $20 million Saudi Cup being run on Saturday morning in Saudi Arabia. Mike, PPs for this race are available. You can get them on DRF.com, Formulator, Timeform US. You definitely want to check out the Timeform US PPs for these international races. There is in-depth commentary from the Timeform team that gives insight into European runners, so definitely access those to handicap along with us. And we've got this large 14-horse field drawn for the Saudi Cup, Mike, but doesn't have the star power that I think we were expecting to see when chatter about this race started up about a month ago.
Yeah, true enough. I mean, I guess more than anything else, you didn't get the American participation that maybe some would have wanted it here. There's some really, really good horses in this race. Obviously, the surface just really comes into play here with so many Europeans and Japanese horses shipping over.
For sure. I mean, horses like White Abario, Sierra Leone, Locked, Laurel River are all supposed to be in the starting gate. Their connections made the decision to defect, or the horses weren't ready to run for whatever reason. But we do have a couple of very nice international runners in this field, Mike, and the two horses that are highlighted as the favorites on the morning line, those being Forever Young and Romantic Warrior. Super talents, each of them. Forever Young obviously has achieved most of his conquests on the dirt. Surface is the big question for Romantic Warrior, but I wouldn't argue with anybody who said he is the best horse in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Romantic Warrior is a world class horse. Forever Young's really good. He ain't at that level yet. Romantic Warrior, if he I think it's pretty safe to say that if he can transfer his form over to dirt, he's the best horse in here and he'll win this race. But it's still a major question.
Well, there's no Timeform US pace projector for this race, not having pace data for a lot of the international runners, but it does feel like there isn't as much speed in here, Mike, as we've seen in the Saudi Cup in previous years, especially not as much speed as we saw last year when Saudi Crown set that extremely fast pace that ultimately set things up for a couple of closers. I mean, I guess horses like the number 12 Walk of Stars could go forward. The number 1 Al Musmak has shown some speed as a local Saudi-based horse, but I wouldn't expect this pace to be blazing.
I didn't think it was going to be that fast either. And I more than anything else, David, too, I felt like that I think it could help Forever Young a little bit. I think he's drawn out wide in this race, but it's a 1-turn mile and eighth with a really long run up the backstretch. So being outside, I don't think it's going to affect him. And it's not like he's a blazing speed horse, but this is going to allow him, especially if they're not going fast, it's going to allow him to get forward and into position early in this race, I think.
Well, let's run through this field, and we're going to go through them in post position order, so out of program number order, but we're going to go from the rail out as we discuss these horses. So we're going to begin with the number 10, Ushba Tesoro, who's drawn in post position number 1. And he is one of 4 Japanese trained runners that's coming over for this race, Mike. And he just barely lost this race last year to Senior Buscador. As I said, that pace really came apart, and it benefited a deep closer like Ushba Tesoro. It's just a little hard to make the argument that he's still in that kind of form in light of his last couple of efforts.
Agreed. Yeah, listen, he travels really, really well. You can ship him anywhere, and he'll tend to show up, but it feels like he needs to catch breaks to come out on top in his races and as well as he ran over here last year. And listen, it's something that's worth at least pointing out that he can ship over here, handle this track, and run really well, but it's not exactly, a feather in your cap to get beaten by Senior Buscador.
The number 6, Intense for Me, is going to be leaving from gate number 2. And he's one of a couple of South American trained horses who was shipping in for this race. And we're going to take a look at his most recent start when he was battling another one of today's rivals that'll be lining up in the Saudi Cup. That is El Código, who's on the inside, and Intense for Me, the chestnut, on the outside, as they are battling to the wire in the Carlos Pellegrini, which is the premier Group 1 race in Argentina. And you could see Intense for Me just barely getting up over El Código on the wire in a bit of an upset. That, of course, was a turf race, and Intense for Me doesn't have much positive experience on the dirt. He's a horse who did take a big step forward when switched to the turf, so the surface is a big question mark for him.
Exactly. They both ran really well in that race, but Intense for Me, not only does he seem more like a turf horse than does El Código, but I can just imagine, I love watching that replay, David, because I can just imagine the connections of Intense for Me, watching that rider give him an absolute perfect trip in that race, right on the tail of El Código, just following him around the track. They knew he was the horse to beat, and everything worked perfectly.
Up next is the horse leaving from the 3rd post position. That is the number 9, Romantic Warrior, one of the favorites in this race. And boy, Mike, I mean, you can't just pile enough accolades on this horse. He is just a horse that has conquered the globe. He is seeking a Group 1 victory in his fifth different country. He's won the last three editions of the Hong Kong Cup. He went to Australia, won the Cox Plate, last time out, a Group 1 victory in Dubai. We'll take a look at his third Hong Kong Cup victory, two back when he got the job done over a very good Japanese horse in Liberty Island, who during her 3-year-old season won the Japanese filly Triple Crown. So, I mean, he has just taken on the world and beaten them, and now he's going to try to take on dirt.
Yeah, and it's the big question of the race. Obviously, again, he's a world class horse, and he's better than these horses if he can transfer form over to dirt, which is always a real question, and it's an even bigger question, David, when you're going to be asked to take a short price, and you will be asked to take a short price.
Yeah, Acclamation, his sire, not really known as a dirt sire, but if you go in the female family, his dam is by Street Cry, out of a Singspiel mare. Both of those sires won Dubai World Cup, so maybe there's a little bit of dirt in there, but he's going to have to prove he can handle a totally different surface for the first time on Saturday. Number 13 is Wilson Tesoro. He's leaving from post 4, one of the Japanese runners in this race, and he's kind of been the Japanese bridesmaid, Mike. I mean, he's tried Group 1 company a number of times. He has finished second in 4 different Grade 1 races over in Japan, the last 2 of which in his most recent starts, the Champions Cup, and then last time the Tokyo Daishoten behind Forever Young. He's really come into some nice form recently. He's better than he was early in his career when he tried the Dubai World Cup last year, but he's got to get over that hump and earn one of these top level victories.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. He's in good form right now. And, listen, he shows up, he tries really hard in all of his races, tends to come up short in the bigger races more often than not. But that he's probably going to be in the mix, at least when this field is coming down the stretch, David. And could be a big advantage in a race like this, where there are just so many question marks with other horses, as far as surface and things like that go. So listen, he's a horse that's worth giving a second look to, at least at a big price.
Post 5 goes to the number 14, Wooten Sun, and he's going to be one of the biggest prices in this race, Mike. It feels like the Saudi Arabian-based runners are a little bit up against it in this field, and this one would need a huge step forward.
Yeah, he was a horse who I had a tough time falling for in this race. Even in his most recent start, where he ran fine, he was no match for Rattle and Roll.
Well, Laurel River's not going to be in the Saudi Cup this year, but his Bupat Simar trained stablemate, number 12, Walk of Stars, will be in the gate leaving from post 6. And it's interesting, Mike, because he's got a very similar running style to that stablemate that did defect from the Saudi Cup, Laurel River. They both like to go to the front end. So Walk of Stars probably going to be contesting the pace here, and we'll see how fast they go up front. Turning back to the 1-turn mile and an eighth sometimes generates faster paces than you see in the 2-turn races at Maidan, where he's been successful. But this horse ran pretty well with a fast pace in the Godolphin Mile last year, so maybe he is up to this task.
Yeah, maybe he is. His last 2 races are fine, and we already sort of discussed the pace a little bit. It doesn't seem like they're going to be, blazing up front, so maybe that's to his advantage too. I didn't really want him in this race, David. Maybe he's dangerous on the front end, but I was sort of looking for other horses in here.
Well, we got to this point in the preview, and we haven't yet mentioned the one American-trained runner in the race. That is the number 8, Rattle and Roll, who's leaving from post position number 7. Ken McPeak trainee, who has won multiple graded stakes races stateside, shipped over to Saudi Arabia last time to compete over the King Abdulaziz course to get a prep in the custodian of the 2 Holy Mosques Cup. And we'll take a look at the replay of that race. And Mike, this horse makes a run from a long way back. This was a 20-horse field. I think he was 19th in the early going, and he just slices through the pack, and you can see him kind of coming into the screen here with the white cap along the inside of the leader. And once he hits top gear, he just sails away from this field late, beating a couple of runners who are back in this race. He's stepping onto much tougher waters here, but we know from his races in the U.S. that he's good.
He is good. This was a Joel Rosario special here in this prep race. First of all, I love that they shipped him over there to get him a run over the track. I think that's going to benefit him. He ran really, really well in there, even with the good trip. And listen, you're right. He's a good horse. Is he a superstar? No, but he's really, really good. I've always been a huge fan of this horse, David, and I'm glad they're giving him a shot here at a big purse.
The other horse that we saw in that replay was the number 11, Wait to Excel, who kind of stalked the pace and then just could not kick with Rattle and Roll in the late stages. He would have to do a lot better here.
Yep, not taking him out of that race.
Up next, there's another Japanese runner leaving from gate 9 is the number 7 Ramjet, and he's another one who chased home Forever Young last time in that Tokyo Daishoten. He's actually chased home Forever Young in his last couple of starts. This is a horse that they had Kentucky Derby aspirations with, going all the way back to when he won the Hyacinth earlier last year, and was, I think, the second qualifier in that Japan road to the Kentucky Derby, so did not get to make it into the Kentucky Derby starting gate, even though his connections wanted to go. And he did some nice things for the first half of the year over in Japan, had a bit of a layoff, and he's lost his last couple of starts, Mike, but I didn't love the ride he got in the Japan Dirt Classic, where he tried to commence a rally before the half-mile pole and went 4 wide around the second turn. And last time, I thought he stayed on pretty well after getting a rail trip behind Forever Young. He was actually traveling better than that one to the quarter pole, and then just couldn't quite kick to the wire. But maybe he's rounding back into a form as a horse that did shape with potential early on.
No, he clearly has talent, and he's still lightly raced enough too that I feel like you can continue to project upside for him. I did think that he ran pretty well in his most recent start. He still didn't run as well as Forever Young did, though. And so, he's got ground to make up, not only on that horse, but probably on some of the others in here as well. Good, big price, so I'm not going to knock this horse, but he better take a step forward in this spot.
Leaving from post 10 is the number 1, Al Musmak, and he feels like one of the pace players in this race. He switched over to dirt for the first time to get a prep in at the King Abdulaziz Dirt Course and went right to the front end. It didn't look like that was a particularly fast pace. The rest of the field was a little bit conservatively ridden early, but he threw down the hammer around the far turn, really stepped on the gas, and just put that field away to open up nearly 10 lengths at the top of the stretch, Mike, before holding on. This is just a way tougher spot, but he did take to the dirt.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, at least you know that he can handle dirt. Now they're going to move him way up in class and just see if he can handle some way better horses.
The number 2, Defunded, is leaving from post position number 11, and this is a horse that American fans will be familiar with from his days in the Bob Baffert stable, actually a Grade 1 winner in the Gold Cup back in May of 2023. Kind of tailed off when he was in Baffert's barn towards the end of that season, and then his last 4 starts have come in the Middle East. Mike did drop in class last time to get a prep win, but that came against much weaker company, and he just didn't really stack up against these types of horses when he competed in the Saudi Cup or Dubai World Cup last year.
Yeah, I just thought he was really hard to make a case for. I mean, if nothing else, if you wanted to try to be positive on him, I know that he won a Grade 1 at a mile and a quarter, David. I never really felt like he wanted to go that far when he was over here with Baffert. 9 furlongs seems like a good distance for him. I just didn't think he was good enough.
Post 12 goes to the number 4, Factor Cheval. And he's a horse, Mike, who has real ability. I mean, he is a Group 1 quality miler in Europe, albeit on the turf. And he is a runner that the connections for a long time have been talking about trying the dirt. He was mentioned as a potential candidate for the Breeders' Cup Classic last year. They ultimately didn't go for that race. They tried the dirt last time in the Group 1 Al Maktoum Challenge, and he was no match for Walk of Stars, but he at least traveled well and finished okay. He's going to have to run better here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's one of the longer prices. If he is indeed a longer price, that I'll probably try to use somewhere, because as you mentioned, he's a Group 1 quality horse on the turf for sure. And as opposed to some of the other horses that are shipping over, it's not like he's a distance specialist. He's like an 8 or 9 furlong horse. So I like that about him. And when he went to dirt last time for the first time, I know that he didn't win, and he didn't come particularly close either. It felt like a good prep to me. They just had him sort of buried behind horses. They let him take a bunch of dirt in his face, and then he got out into the clear in the stretch. And listen, it was too late at that point, but he actually ran at the end of that spot, I thought.
Post 13 goes to the number 3, El Código, a horse that I know you have some interest in, Mike. He battled with Intense for me in that replay that we showed earlier of the Pellegrini, but had gotten the better of that rival in 2 prior turf starts. But interspersed between those races, and even since the last time, he's run on the dirt and run pretty well.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, he's a good turf horse also. I think he might be better on the dirt. And listen, even though he lost that race 2 starts back, I still thought he ran really well. And more than anything else, too, I just like the way he travels in his races. He's really handy. He's got speed, but he doesn't need the lead. I think he'll get the right trip in this race. I don't mind them cutting back in distance for this. So I don't know. I just felt like there were, among the bigger prices and horses who could really get overlooked in here, I thought he was very interesting.
And then rounding out the field all the way on the outside in post 14 is the number 5, Forever Young. And Mike, any way you slice it, he is just way the horse to beat in this Saudi Cup. He's run nothing but strong races on the dirt right since the start of his career. And yeah, he's lost against some of the best company a couple of times in the Kentucky Derby and the Breeders' Cup Classic when he traveled over to the United States, but he gave a good account of himself in both of those races, having a little bit of trouble in the Derby. And then the Breeders' Cup Classic, I personally think was a bit of a missed opportunity because I think they made a tactical error to ride him as aggressively as they did that day. But he got right back on track in that Group 1 in Japan last time and beat 3 rivals that he's meeting again here.
Yeah, I liked his prep last time. This is it here. They just sort of put him right up close, and you can see like he doesn't bury these horses, David, but they're never catching him. And I think he's just better than them. I don't really mind them dropping back to a mile and an eighth in here, but I guess we'll see how that plays. I will say the one thing that maybe worried me a little bit is they did ship him over here to run in the Saudi Derby last year. It was a mile. It was off a layoff. That wasn't his best performance. He worked really, really hard to get there that day, but he did get there. It's a good horse, and because this race is on dirt, he's probably the horse to beat.
Yeah, that Saudi Derby, though, in retrospect, has been a bit of a key race with Bookham Dano winning a Grade 1 back in the States, and even third place Ben Tornado just barely losing the Breeders' Cup Sprint later in the year. And maybe the outside post position is really going to work to the favor of Forever Young, who the connections have said in the past doesn't really like kickback. I don't know if I've seen that come to fruition in his races. Mike, let's throw up our picks for this Saudi Cup, and I think we're going to both have Forever Young in the mix. You've got him in the third slot. I've got him in the second slot. We also have some interest in Rattle and Roll, but you're going to go for more of a price with the 3 El Código.
Yeah, just figured if I am going to bet this race, I'm not going to take one of the shorter prices in here. I'll just take a shot, hope that I can beat Forever Young in this spot. I respect Romantic Warrior. I'm not betting him at a short price in here. I'll go for a price with El Código. Believe me, it was hard for me not to put Rattle and Roll on top, but I'll be rooting for him.
As a fan of the game, I would love to see Romantic Warrior get it done. He's just not the kind of horse I would ever bet in a race like this. And the horse that I am interested in betting is the number 7, Ramjet. Yes, he was not as good as Forever Young last time, but I feel like he's been stepping forward now since he had that layoff last summer. And I really thought he showed potential early on in his career. So maybe he's ready to now reach his apex as a 4-year-old. So it's 7, 5, 8, 13 for me and 3, 8, 5, 4 for Mike in the $20 million Group 1 Saudi Cup on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.